Welcome to the Black Duck Revival Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Wilkins. I'm excited to have you join me as I speak with a fascinating collection of folks, all of whom have in common that they've made a way for themselves by finding an intersection between thoughtful consideration and the tactile work of getting their hands dirty. This is an examination of intention, capability, and craft. It's where philosophy meets the blue-collar work ethic and where I find real value. Hey folks, this week you've got me solo, and I'm going to be giving you a 2026 Black Duck Revival State of the Union, as it were. I figured I would take this opportunity to let you know what's going on with Black Duck Revival, what I've got planned for this spring, and the months ahead. So starting off here in Arkansas, we had that freeze that a lot of the Southeast experienced there in February, and as soon as that was over, it was like spring had sprung. Stuff started warming up and it started greening up. Now we are about to have a few days of some colder weather, but I think for the most part, spring is here and has been for a couple of weeks. I know that turkeys have already started strutting at my buddy Jason's place over in Vaughn, Mississippi. I haven't really heard too many reports about them going off a whole bunch here in Arkansas, but I've also been pretty preoccupied with some other stuff and haven't done too much investigation. But I suspect, especially after we get past the next few days of colder weather and it starts to warm back up and spring kind of firmly takes hold, I think they'll be in full strut, full bloom, whatever cliche you want to use. And so that kind of brings me to the idea of turkey bebop this year. In years past, I've done some fairly extensive traveling for turkeys, going to far-flung places like Oregon, California, down in Texas, New Mexico, where else have I gone? Michigan, South Georgia, Oklahoma, Colorado, I think a couple other places too. But last year, I hunted Arkansas pretty extensively, and I killed a bird in Central Texas at my friend Greg Ring's place. But that was about it last year. I spent most of my time really hustling around Arkansas and trying to get this elusive Arkansas gobbler. I had a couple of very, very close encounters, including one up in the Ozarks, where I had a bird sneak in on me spitting and drumming at 3 yards, and I did little more than scare it, shoot right past its head, and throw myself off of the stool that I was sitting on inside of this concealment blind. It's the first time I'd ever hunted out of a blind like that, and I just was not I just wasn't accustomed to the lack of ability to see peripherally. And then also I didn't trust that, I could see this bird through the mesh, and it was right there on top of me, but it couldn't see me. If I just stayed still, it would have walked by me and I could have shot it in the back of the head. But anyway, I had another cool experience, where a chunk of public land here in Arkansas, first day I showed up to, I struck a bird, got set up on it, called it in from about 200 yards away. It came in with a hen and it strutted in front of me for about 15 minutes, just spitting and drumming. And it was right at 30 yards, but just because of the positioning, it was down below me, just out of eyesight in this slight depression. And after 15 minutes, the hen finally popped her head up and saw me, and they skedaddled. But really, man, a pretty cool turkey season. You are not supposed to win all the time. You're really supposed to lose more times than not, and that's what happened to me last year. This year, I want to tell you about a project that I've really been trying to make happen for the last couple of seasons, and it, as of yet, has not come to fruition through traditional means. And so I wanted to kind of present it to you guys and tell you what I'm going to try and do to try and make it happen on my own. But I guess two turkey seasons ago, 2 or 3, excuse me while I drink some of my throat coat tea. I was I hunted in South Georgia and then went to Mississippi. And I was with my good friend Jay Beyer, who's been a guest here on the podcast a couple of times. Jay Beyer is a Utah-based photographer, hunting photographer, adventure photographer, skiing, mountain biking, snowboarding, and just a beautiful human being. And we were going from Georgia to Mississippi. We hunted in Georgia for 3 or 4 days. And then we were traveling from the swampy southern part of South Georgia across Alabama all the way to eastern Mississippi to hunt the Mississippi Delta there. And as we were doing so, and I didn't really realize it, just, following Google Maps or whatever, but as we were doing so, we had an occasion to enter Selma, Alabama, and go across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Now, if you're not familiar with Edmund Pettus Bridge, by name, I'm sure you are just by photos or, images and history documentaries or the like. But the Edmund Pettus Bridge was the site of a violent conflict between black civil rights protesters in the 60s and some very violent and hate-filled law enforcement. And they were told, the civil rights protesters were told not to cross the bridge. It was men, women, and children. Martin Luther King Jr. was there. And essentially what happened is law enforcement and the fire department there, they set dogs on these protesters. They hit them with fire hoses, which, as a former firefighter, you're talking about a tremendous amount of pressure. Some of those lines, if you wanted to, you could take the skin off of a person. And they beat these protesters. They beat them. They abused them. They brutalized them. And then they put them in jail. And it was really an incredibly violent, barbaric scene that kind of changed the tide of the civil rights movement in the rest of the United States, because the images from that occasion were so gut-wrenching and violent and unacceptable to middle America that it kind of, that scale that was weighted in another direction kind of started tipping a bit more towards passing the civil rights bill. So a super important and emblematic locale, right? As an American, specifically for me as, a person of color, a black man in America. And dude, I just was kind of like overcome with emotion. And it was a little strange for me because, I definitely come out of that school of like a stiff upper lip kind of deal. I'm not super comfortable. Just to put it frankly, I'm not really comfortable crying. And, I was overwhelmed to the point that I got tears in my eyes. I started crying. And I was with Jay, and as I described him, Jay's just a beautiful human being, much more comfortable with those emotions, and outward displays of vulnerability than I am. But, Jay and I come from very different backgrounds. And it's one of the reasons that I love this guy so much, because we have such deep, meaningful conversations, and we have done so traveling across the United States in a van and in a car, for days and weeks on end, talking about these big, heady subjects. And Jay was asking me why I was having such an intense reaction, to this seemingly innocuous transgression, on our trip. And I was trying to explain to him the weight of that place and the weight that it carried for me in my experiences, my lived experiences, and more so even like the history of my family and my people and like who I come from. And while I believe him to be very empathetic, I don't think it's something that he could fully understand because our lived experiences have been so different, right? And I was kind of struck in that moment with the intensity of that experience and the juxtaposition to where I was in that moment, right? Like here I am, a black man traveling across the Deep South, armed, right? In itself, kind of a revolutionary act for much of American history, specifically in that place. And also, here I am pursuing this most emblematic American bird, I'd argue. And so I'm in this place and I'm experiencing the feelings and the repercussions of this peculiarly, that's not the way to say that. This specifically peculiar American institution, right? This vestige of like our great sin. And for better or worse, I'd say mostly for worse, that is a deeply rooted part of Americana. Also, this bird, the turkey, right? Endemic to North America, right? This is, I'd say, more so even than the bald eagle, right? We've all heard about Ben Franklin and him wanting the turkey to be the symbol of America. But, this is America's bird. This is probably one of the first animals that European settlers or colonizers, pursued and consumed when they landed on the shores of the East Coast here in America. And so you have these kind of two specifically American institutions colliding with each other, right? And then you've got me experiencing it as well. And like I've argued to people before, but I feel like I'm about as American as a person can be because I am from, St. Louis, Missouri. I'm from pretty much the exact north, south, east, west interface in this country, right? Right on the center of the most important navigable waterway in this country's history, right? The Mississippi River. Half black, half white, right? These two colliding forces, these two, kind of like chessboard-like pieces that have danced with each other and fought each other and have this still kind of like problematic and untenable to some degree relationship, right? And so you've got that American ideal combined with the American ideal of that turkey, combined with the, I would argue the peculiar institution of a person being able to travel around with a firearm, right? That's pretty specifically American, especially in modern times. And then mix that with this idea of the North American wildlife model and this idea that we could go from state to state, traveling to hunt and pursue wild animals and compete with them on their landscape for, knowledge and experience and sustenance. So for the last couple of years, I've been pitching this idea, this story, to periodic publications, right? Magazines. And I've just been met with a resounding not interested, either just directly saying, that's not something we're interested in, or a lot of just being, have an initial conversation saying, yeah, they're interested in hearing a pitch, and then I pitch it to them, and then I just get silence, and I never get a response, right? And it's been kind of disheartening because more so even than, trying to get paid to write this piece, which I want, what I've pitched is a fairly substantial piece. It's traveling to 4 distinct places in the American South, partly recreating that trip from Georgia to Mississippi, turkey hunting in Georgia and Mississippi, and traveling across that Edmund Pettus locale, going through Selma, talking about all of that, but also going to Appalachia, Western North Carolina, and then and hunting with my friend David Joy, who's been on the podcast, and then also going, I've become friendly with a gentleman who is, I think, the second or third largest black farmer in the United States, which, most black farmers in the United States have gone the way of the dinosaur. That's a much bigger conversation. I hope to have them on the podcast here in the coming weeks, and we'll talk about that. But there's not a lot of black farmers left, and the black farmers that are left have very small chunks of land that they're farming. This particular gentleman is farming about 10,000 acres between Virginia and Arkansas, and he's a multi-generational landowner there, agricultural landowner there in Virginia. And he's got some stuff there right by the coast that's supposedly covered up with turkeys. And so I really wanted to kind of build this kind of like holistic and multi-layered quilt of this storytelling through the Deep South, through, what I would consider a very different version of the South up in Appalachia, and then over to Virginia, which I would kind of consider a part of like the aristocratic South, right? And going from Delta to deep Georgia swamp to the mountains of Appalachia, and then to ending up in Virginia with this black landowner granted access, kind of telling just like how I'm doing this here, right? Just a bit of a ramble, but obviously pulled together a bit more because I'll be sitting down and writing it. Also, the idea that I pitched is that I would document this visually with a point and shoot disposable camera. You get like 24 exposures on each one of those, and I would dedicate each one of those to each one of the places that I went to. Some of that is stylistic just because, we have this hyper realism now with the quality of digital photography. And I think that sometimes it captures so much that we lose a bit of the imagination and the space filling in that we're able to do otherwise. And, some of that is just like kind of my old style aesthetic, but also just the ability, something simple that I could do and document the way that people used to when they would go on, just personal family expeditions, vacations, whatnot. And I really thought that if I did a kind of a long form essay, so long form meaning, more than 2,000 words, which would be kind of a traditional magazine feature. If you had like a 6 or 7 page magazine feature with photography, that would usually come up to about 2,000 or 2,500 words. And, I wanted to do something more substantive than that, coupled with those pictures. And really, like, I would do it just for enough money to be able to pay for gasoline and tags and, white bread and cheese and chopped ham loaf from the dollar store. But alas, over the last 2 years, and going through every avenue that I know, like places I've written for before, using connections of mine that I have with people in the industry, going outside of the hunting realm and going into more kind of sociologically based periodicals and stuff. I think it's too weighty a subject matter for a traditional hook and bullet magazine, right? And then I think the hunting and gun aspect of it makes a lot of these other non-hunting publications uncomfortable. And so it's kind of a story that I think is super important, but it doesn't have a home. And so what I've decided to do, and look, I'm going to be totally frank with you, this is going to be dependent on whether or not I can raise a few dollars for this. But I've decided to try and fund this myself. We don't need a ton of money, essentially, call it $1,500 is what I'd be trying to raise. And I know that seems like a small amount of money, but just $1,500 is not always easy for me to, $1,500 extra dollars is not always easy for me to come up with, specifically like this time of year, right? Like a lot of my income would come during hunting season, right? So this is kind of like the time of year where I'm hustling up other jobs, doing remodels or landscaping or whatnot. So I would be trying to come up with about $1,500 to try and buy tags and gas and just a little bit of food, and then go to these places. And, I'll sleep in my car, or up some of those places I'd be able to stay at a buddy's house or something like that. And then write this piece and produce this piece, independently, and then just put it out into the ether, put it out into the world. If I can't get someone to publish it, then I'll publish it myself. Now that might be digitally, but what I'd really like to do is get it produced and then probably do like a 2-part publishing of it, where like it would be available in a digital format, but then also do like a limited run of some printed versions of that. And the way that I'm trying to raise some money for that is by selling some t-shirts. So we've got a new t-shirt design. We haven't put a t-shirt out in several years, but I've had a loose idea for a while. And my wife, my muse, my artistic director, Marianne Nolly, has designed a really cool t-shirt. It's kind of based on the old blaxploitation film Superfly's advertisement poster. So you could Google that if you haven't seen it before, but it's Superfly there and all his accoutrement with his fringed hat and his cape and whatnot, and he's standing there next to a big decked out Cadillac and some cool lettering that says Superfly. And so what we've got is something based on that. We've got an anthropomorphized turkey and all of his accoutrement and standing next to a truck there, and it says Chasing Jive Turkeys, Black Duck Revival down there at the bottom. Man, it's cool and it's funny and it's a little tongue-in-cheek. And also a part of it would be that it would be printed here in Little Rock, Arkansas at Electric Ghost Studios, which is like a local small hand-screened t-shirt business, just maybe like 3 or 4 miles from my house. And also something that's important to me too is that even though it's based on a blaxploitation film, we're trying to make it keep our exploitation of other people in the procurement and design of it to as little as possible. So it's on all American made t-shirts. So t-shirts made here in America, people paid a fair wage, all those good health and safety standards that maybe aren't as available to people in developing nations. It's a naturally colored shirt, so it's just kind of like a natural raw cotton shirt. It's got red ink on it, and they'll be produced here in Little Rock, Arkansas, and then we'll pack them up. Me and my family will pack them up and ship them out to you. So try to make a few dollars on each one of those t-shirts, and we're going to charge $30 for them. You'll be able to find them for pre-order on Instagram, Black Duck Revival, and also at the website blackduckrevival.com. And this podcast will be coming out on March 16th. We'll run the pre-order for a couple of weeks, and hopefully we can raise some of the funds to make this project happen. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, or you just like the sound of the t-shirt, man, I'd be super appreciative if you ordered a t-shirt. Like I said, we'll do pre-order for a couple of weeks, and then we'll get them printed, and then we'll mail them off to you, and I'll probably throw a couple stickers or handwritten note or something like that in there as well. So pretty easy way to support if you are so inclined, and if you got a couple extra dollars. All right, so next up, I hit the wrong button and stopped it, but hopefully our man behind the scenes, Brian Sachs, can edit that together in a seamless manner. Next up, I got a dry erase board here with a few notes written on it. I wanted to talk about alligators. So if you follow me on social media, or if you listened to the podcast last week, you've heard or seen me talking about my 2025 alligator season down in South Texas. So just briefly what that was I was able to procure a lease on a really phenomenal piece of property down there, and it's 3,000 acres. It's situated between 2 bayous. It's located about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour south of Houston. So like really, if you fly in, it's a pretty easy spot to get to. But it's built on an old fish farm. It's been shut down for about 40 or 45 years. So what's cool about this place, specifically for that region, is that it has, because it was an old catfish farm, it has all these dugout reservoirs, right? So like basically big rectangular ponds on the front side of that property. And then you also have a bayou on either side. Imagine a piece of property that's shaped kind of like an ice cream cone. So the top part of that ice cream cone is going to have all these rectangular reservoirs and channels, irrigation system to move water all over the property. And then on either side is going to be a bayou that meets down at the point they intersect down there at the bottom. And so this property is allotted a certain number of alligator tags every September. As part of that lease, I get a hold of those tags. So that means that there's a small number of alligators that I'm able to guide for, and basically we can catch them on a hook and a line. And if you've looked at the YouTube channel that we've recently started dolling up, you can see a short, like 11 or 12 minute film where me and my friend Brad are catching some of those alligators. I think we catch 3 or 4 in that film. The biggest one was 10 foot long. That was the biggest one of the season. And honestly, man, we really had a really great alligator season. Our average size on gators was 8 foot. The biggest one was 10 foot. And what's neat about that, something to think about, is that, a 10-foot alligator is probably a 60 or 70-year-old animal. Even more compelling on that is to think about, the American alligator was once on the endangered species list. And the recovery was so successful that it's not only able to be removed in many places, or I think nationwide, from the endangered species list, but now there are recreational seasons for them. Like we've got one in Arkansas here, there's recreational season in Texas, but there's also to the point that there's like commercial fisheries for alligators. If you've ever seen that Discovery Channel show Swamp People, like that's what they're doing. Those guys are going out and they are commercially catching alligators for the meat and leather market. So what we're able to do down there is catch alligators, turn them into food, turn them into leather, turn them into a beautiful, unique trophy with the skulls, and also just have an experience that very few people will ever have on a location that is beautiful and very different than where most people live. It's a fairly treeless area, which is strange for me because of where I live, but incredibly beautiful, incredibly rich with wildlife, birds of all description. You've got huntable populations of waterfowl there. Alligator season coincides with blue-winged teal season. So last year, we were doing blue-winged teal hunts. We were doing alligator hunts. This property also has a problem with feral hogs. There's a ton of those on the property, and they're doing untold amounts of damage to the levee systems and whatnot. And so we're able to hunt those both as a recreation and a food source, and then as a service to the landowner and the farmers. So I was able to put together some cool experiential packages where folks were hunting ducks, hunting alligators, hunting wild pigs, and we threw some dove hunts there as well. And I really feel like, learned what I was doing pretty well. I think I got a good handle on the property. I got a good handle on the methods. I've already been setting aside beaver shoulders to use for bait this year. They really seemed like they responded well to the beaver meat. Tried a bunch of different kinds of bait last year. And you can catch them on all sorts of stuff, but it seemed like that beaver meat worked really well, which makes sense because, here trapping, everything likes beaver meat. And then we tried some other weird stuff too. I'm making some little secret sauces here with some rendered beaver tail oil to add as like an oil slick addition. So I feel confident we're going to have a good gator season this year. If you're interested in that, please go to the website. And the website again is just blackduckrevival.com. Go to the experiences tab and click on, or just rather scroll down through there, and you can check out that gator hunting film. You can check out some of the gators that we caught last year, some of the pigs that we were able to get a hold of, and take a look at the packages we're offering. I've got a very, very limited number of gator tags that I'm offering up, and I feel like it's pretty good value, man. It's 4 nights. It's 3 days. We're going to gator hunt. We're going to hog hunt. We're going to try a couple different methods for hogs, We'll do some spot and stalk evening stuff. We'll do some blind sits. May even throw in some thermal hunts there at night. I'm not offering right now. I'm not offering any of the blue-winged teal hunts. That might come a little bit later in the season, but really that's going to be rain dependent. They've been in a bit of a drought for the last year and a half and have not been able to pump water onto the property. And so that water's been going down. I'm confident there'll be teal there, but I want to ensure that we've got a certain level of experience that I can offer to folks before, I'm asking for people's money. So if you really want to hunt birds, check back in a couple of months on the website. But man, I'd really encourage folks, if you want a really cool, unique experience, like I said, it's 3 days of hunting, 4 nights, stay in a very comfortable modern lodge. You get a private room, you get a private bathroom. We've got a really awesome returning chef coming. You get all those game processing and game cooking instructional classes from me. And we also can offer meat processing and hide processing and doing a Euro mount for you. We can do all of that in-house for you. So basically it's a one-stop shop. You come there. If you want to bring a non-hunting partner, you're totally welcome to do that. We can work that out amongst ourselves. If you want to do a package like a couple of buddies or a father and son or a husband and wife, just shoot me an email or shoot me a Instagram message and let's talk and we'll figure something out. I'd really love to have a parent and child come. That's kind of always the most fun for me. So check that out. And, moving on from there, again, referencing the YouTube page, I've had a YouTube page for 5 years and there's been this one catfish video on it and just been busy doing other stuff. Have filmed quite a bit of other things, but it's all been for, other people's channels or brands or whatever. And so now I'm really trying to lean into doing stuff for myself and for, under the heading of Black Duck Revival. So we've released that alligator hunting short film. We've also released an alligator cooking video as well. We've got another how-to instructional video coming out this week. Hope to do some turkey hunt filming stuff coming up here this spring. And then also I'm really trying to get up to a weekly release on that channel where we've got some sort of cooking instruction or how-to instruction and a bit more than just, hunting, a bit more than your normal kind of hook and bullet and rod and reel kind of stuff. So I guess that kind of leads me into what's going on with Black Duck Revival. So I guess I'd say that, Black Duck Revival started and has remained, I'd say, very much a passion project for me. It kind of came and developed from me creating this place that was important to me. And then as it matured and grew, and I've got to find a better word other than metastasize, because that, is emblematic of cancer, but just grew and changed and morphed. And, other entities took interest in it. I've been able to avail myself of some different opportunities and go some different places and meet just an amazing array of people. But at its core, Black Duck Revival, I think is really always been about the way that I see the world and kind of my lifestyle. And while I think the idea of a lifestyle brand is pretty gross sounding, it sounds to me like someone who's trying to hawk live, laugh, love antiqued wooden signs for above your couch. I guess that's kind of what it is and kind of what I'm maybe trying to lean into a little bit. And so that just means, yes, obviously the hunting and the fishing and the cooking. But, beyond that, the repairing of things, right? The self-reliance aspects that we've talked so much on this podcast about. Like this spring and summer, one of my big projects is removing my front yard, or the majority of my front yard, and turning that into like a big kind of victory garden plot here at home. And that's motivated by a couple of things. I'd say One, just I'm always looking to do more things for myself, be less reliant on systems that I frankly feel like don't serve me. And, I think specifically in the last few years, when you had the COVID epidemic and then now through what I would describe as kind of some political unrest that we're experiencing here in America, you see gasoline, the price of gasoline going up, you see the price of groceries going up. Like anything you could do to alleviate a little bit of that seems like a good idea. And if it's just a matter of some time and some effort, I've got plenty of both of those. Not to mention that it is just incredibly self-validating and feels good and tastes good when, you go out and get your own stuff. And so I think what I've decided to do this first year, and, I've grown plenty of stuff and I've had gardens over the years of varying levels of success. I think what I pretty much want to do is just put in a big patch of sweet corn for a couple of reasons. One, I just want to focus on growing one thing, make it easier to maintain, hopefully easier to be successful with. But also, as we move into these hot summer months here in Arkansas and just the heat becomes so oppressive, you're talking about 100-degree days with regularity, 80+% humidity, just every day feels like a wet blanket coming out of a dryer. Just for a comfort factor, and then also just so we don't have to pay so much for energy to keep cool in the house. Once we get into those really warmer months, I try and do a lot of our meals by like just doing grilled meat and salads or grilled meat and a grilled vegetable. And my kids and my wife love sweet corn, right? I mean, most people like sweet corn. And so I could pretty much every day, I could cook a couple of wild boar steaks and grill some corn and my family would be happy. So I'm going to do a big patch of peaches and cream sweet corn, which if you've never had is just a super tasty sweet variety of sweet corn. It's got kind of like a pale yellow peach, kind of orange colored kernel alternating with like a white kernel, peaches and cream. And, I can put in a pretty decent sized plot for very little money, just tend to it every couple of days and still have lots of extra to trade folks with. Everybody else is going to be growing tomatoes and zucchinis and peppers and stuff. So I figure if I've got some delicious sweet corn, maybe might grow some watermelons or something like that, just stuff that makes people happy and you can trade, and seems like a good way to be. Also, I need to tighten up my chicken coop and get some laying hens back in there. Just stuff all my chickens got killed by raccoons a season ago. And then I could tell ammo was getting toward the end and, I was trying to potty train my boy and all this other stuff. I just kind of let the chickens go for a season. But all of that kind of stuff I think is really important to the idea of Black Duck Revival and kind of what I'm trying to put out to the world. So I think a lot of content for YouTube surrounding that kind of stuff is what you might be able to expect to see in the coming months. What else have I got here on my dry erase board? We talked about Turkey Bebop. We talked about the YouTube channel. We talked about, I'll tell you this too. I've got a few folks that email me from time to time that listen to the podcast, and man, that's really a treat for me. I really enjoy it. It's just nice to hear from people that are listening to something I'm putting effort into, and I'd love to hear a little bit more from you guys. So if there is stuff that you would like for me to be covering or talking about or thinking about when it comes to this YouTube channel and the podcast, please feel free to send me an email. The email address is very simple. It's just blackduckrevival@gmail.com. There seems to be a theme here with Black Duck Revival, right? But just blackduckrevival@gmail.com. Send me a note. Tell me what you like, or if there's something specifically that you'd like me to talk about or cover. I can't promise I'll always do it, but I'm definitely very open to hearing from you and listening to what you have to say, and love just chatting with folks. It's a nice part of my day. So please feel free to do that. Actually, I don't just feel free. I implore you to do that. It would make me feel good, and I think it would help out the audio and the visual portions of what I'm trying to do here. Also, over on the YouTube channel, we have all of the podcast. All of the Black Duck Revival podcast episodes are now up on YouTube. So if you're a person who likes to listen to podcasts or uses YouTube to do that, man, you can get them over there. And, YouTube is a kind of a funny thing. Just having a YouTube channel is kind of a vanity project until you get to a certain number of subscribers and a certain number of downloads or hours watched. So we definitely hope to see the number of subscribers over there continue to grow, because right now it is far, far below the ability to monetize anything. And that's fine for now, again, most of what I do is a passion project, but if you listen to the podcast, it'd be a big help if you'd go over to YouTube and just subscribe to the channel, if that's a place you also consume information, which most of us do. And pretty easy to do so. So, yeah, again, please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not done so yet. I think really the last thing I would broach when it comes to Black Duck Revival and what I'm hoping for this year, I've got a couple other projects that I'm pitching that are in the works. I've got a duck hunting and decoy carving project that I pitched and didn't get quite the reception that I was hoping for, but so I've kind of rejiggered it, and I think I've made it a lot better and a lot more interesting. And that's another project that I'm going to do, whether or not I can kind of sell it or not. We'll talk more about that later. But and then there's also, I got an idea for a little bit of a caribou adventure that I've been talking to a buddy about. So we'll see if we can't make that happen as well. But I'd say that, since this is supposed to be a State of the Union, I'm going to expose myself a bit more than I already do in this podcast and tell you all about something that's, really kind of laying heavy on my mind and is kind of a motivating force for what I want to do for the foreseeable future. I think it would be a bit of an understatement to say that I am concerned about, the state of this country right now, and talking about the division seems a bit cliched, but, I've got a family that might look different than yours, right? I've got a multiracial family. My kids they're all kind of like different shades of brown and pink. And, I worry about my safety and their safety and my ability to protect my family and take care of them. And, I've got all of those fears with the rhetoric and just the seemingly endless amounts of intolerance and hatefulness that are being spewed around right now. And then that coupled with something else that might even be more sinister, which is this abdication of human autonomy that I see with our disconnect from natural cycles, coupled with this full-fledged leaning into artificial intelligence. And my friends have heard me railed about this. I think that AI is probably one of the most destructive and serious threats towards, human creativity and the idea of art that I've seen in my 42 years of living. And I've talked about on this podcast many times before that I'm strongly motivated by the idea of art and creation for the sake of exploration of the human experience, right? And exploring the nature of what it means to be human. And I think that if we abdicate our ability to do that to non-sentient systems, and not just non-sentient systems, right? It's not just a robot doing something or a computer program doing something. Behind all of that is some rich person that wants to commodify and monetize our thoughts and our ideas and what we're thinking about and dreaming about and wishing to create. And I think you couple all that together, and it's pretty terrifying to me. I'm not without hope. I've not become overwhelmed with pessimism, but there's some trepidation in my optimism from time to time. And so with Black Duck Revival, I really want to be an antithesis to that, right? I want to lean wholeheartedly into the idea of doing things for yourself. Again, the idea of the podcast about finding that intersect between thoughtful consideration and the hard work of using your hands, getting your hands dirty, feeling dirt, getting splinters, understanding the tactile resonance of doing things for yourself and the inherent validation and worth and wealth, and internal wealth that comes from participating in those processes. And so doing that for myself, doing that as an example to my children, my community, and, maybe anybody else who cares to listen to me. So, that's a bunch of heady, maybe self-righteous proclamations from somebody who people kind of started paying attention to because I was, interested in hunting ducks, but it's the truth and it's what's important to me. It's weird. I did not kill a single duck last year, and I'm totally all right with that. Not doing it for a year kind of made me miss it, but I've gotten to duck hunt so many cool places and in so many cool ways over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It's really helped me focus in on what's important to me with duck hunting. And it's the same sort of thing. It's not going to big fancy clubs. It's not going to far-flung places. It's truthfully, there will never be a more beautiful duck hunting experience to me than breaking mallards in timber in Arkansas, in flooded timber in Arkansas. I think it's the greatest expression of that art form, that pursuit that exists on this planet. And if I could only do it one more time, that's the way I'd want to do it. But even more so than that, I want to do it over decoys that I carved that have my personality and my worldview embodied in them. I want to do it with a duck call that I turned on my lathe that sounds like me and sounds like what I think a duck call should sound like. And I want to do it with the people that are important to me and matter to me and that share some similarities in worldview. So that's what I'm going to be doing this coming year and this coming season. I appreciate you guys listening, as always, to my rambles. We'll be back next week with someone, in addition to just myself, another one of our fascinating guests. I've got some cool people lined up. Folks, I'm really excited to have some deep conversations with and hopefully bring you some new and interesting perspectives. Folks, thank you sincerely for listening. Until next time.